The decipherment of Meroitic writing. The Meroitic people of ancient Meroe left us numerous inscriptions. These inscriptions allow us to gain keen insight into the Meroitic culture, the culture that the Meroitic people created. I decipher Meroitic based on the most logical path to the decipherment of any dead language. Maurice Poe, in the story of archaeological decipherment, made it clear that before an unknown language can be deciphered, you must have the right theoretical structure to base your inquiry upon. Pope found that in the historical decipherments of ancient languages, three preliminary conditions must be met. One, confidence that a script can be deciphered. Two, location of proper names must be determined. Three, the grammatical rules of the target language or script must be found. I was able to read Meroitic because the preliminary conditions were met, and we were able to develop new hypotheses based on historical evidence to determine the cognate language of Meroitic. Conditions number 1 and 2 were met by Llewellyn Griffin when he deciphered the Meroitic script in 1910, and his discovery of the proper names of the Meroitic gods and individuals in Meroitic texts. Griffin also discovered the direction of Meroitic writing was written. When I did my decipherment, I published it some time ago, and I wanted in a sense to make people aware of the fact that the Meroitic script is an ancient and most notable language for the ancient Meroites. Meroe is a beautiful civilization, and Meroe has left us many inscriptions on many sites. The recognition by Griffin of the solubility of the Meroitic test was reinforced in 1978 with the publication of UNESCO's The Peopling of Ancient Egypt and the Decipherment of Meroitic Script. In this publication, Dr. Diop made it very noticeable to all who had read the book that this was the time to decipher Meroitic. He made it clear that researchers, if they hope to decipher Meroitic, must rely on up-to-date texts. Condition number 3 for the decipherment of Meroitic was met in 1979 when Fritz Heinz published his Beiträge zur Meroitischen Grammatik. The research of F. Heinz and I. Hoffman have made it possible for us to find the cognate language of Meroitic, Tocharian, or Kahshanna. The work of Griffin and Heinz fulfilled all the requirements for the decipherment of the Meroitic writing. The comparative method was used to find the cognate language of Meroitic. Using this method, Meroitic scholars have compared the known Meroitic terms to vernacular African languages to establish morphological cognition between the Meroitic and an African language. Up to now, these linguistic comparisons failed to reveal the cognate language of Meroitic. Researchers working on the Meroitic language do not believe that it was a member of the Afro-Asian group. Griffin and Hycock tried to read Meroitic using Nubian. K.H. Priest tried to read the Meroitic text using Eastern Sudani. And Fritz Heinz attempted to compare Meroitic with the Ural-Altic group. Recently, Siegat Hummel compared the known Meroitic words to words in the Altaic family, which he believed was a substrate language of Meroitic. And an upstart researcher, Riley, has tried to read Meroitic as a proto-language, but his main problem is that the Nubians were never a part of the Meroitic Empire. These scholars failed to find a match between Meroitic and the vernacular language of Nubia and the Sudan. This made it necessary to turn to the historical literature concerning the Kushites to form a new hypothesis related to possible sources of the Meroitic language. The historical literature of the Kushites that comes from Egyptian and classical sources provides us with insight into trying to find out who may have contributed to the rise of the Meroitic people. Following the Egyptians and other ancient peoples, the classical scholars also called the Sudanese Ethiopians or Kushites. The classical scholars made it clear that the Kushites lived not only in Africa, but also Asia. Homer alluded to the two Kushite empires when he wrote, "A race divided, whom the sloping rays, the rising and the setting sun surveys." Herodotus also said that there were two Ethiopias. The Roman Strabo also claimed that there were two Ethiopias. So we find that Kushites, according to the classical writers, not only lived in Africa, but they also lived in Asia. This would explain the statement by Philostratus in the Life of Apollonius and Jerome that the Genopsophists of Cush, who settled near the source of the Nile, descended from the Brahmin of India, having been forced to migrate after the murder of their king. Eustatus also said that the Kushites, Meroites, came from India. We can also be sure that the Kushan were known in northeast Africa, because a hoard of Kushan coins were found on the floor of a cave in present-day monastery in modern-day Ethiopia. Philostratus in the Life of Apollonius of Tyana makes it clear that the Gymnosophists lived in Upper Egypt and the Meroitic Empire. The Gymnosophists were Buddhists. The Indian scholars living in Upper Egypt and the Meroitic Sudan introduced the Tocharian language and the Karasthi script to the Meroites. My decipherment of Meroitic is based on Kahshanna Theory. The Kahshanna Theory is that a group of East Indian scholars, the Gymnosophists, introduced Tocharian and the Karasthi script, which became the foundation of Meroitic writing system. Philostratus in the Life of Apollonius of Tyana makes it clear that the Gymnosophists lived in Upper Egypt and the Meroitic Empire. And as mentioned earlier, the Gymnosophists were Buddhists. There were Gymnosophist communities in Upper Egypt and the Meroitic Sudan. We can therefore say that the Gymnosophists were Meroitic nationals, just like many of the other African groups. The historical evidence makes it clear that there were probably two migrations of Buddhist Gymnosophists to Egypt and the Meroitic Empire. The first migration probably occurred during the Persian period. The second was during the rule of Asoka, who was a supporter of Buddhism. Asoka was a great king in India. Thundi maintains in Buddha and Christ that Asoka sent out numerous Buddhist missionaries to Egypt to preach the Buddhist Dhamma. Thundi maintained that the archaeological evidence exists for a community of Indian sages living in Memphis as early as 200 BC. This was supported by the Egyptian archaeologist Flanders Petrie in 1908, who found archaeological evidence that Buddhist colonists had come into Egypt during the Persian period. And he published a picture showing these folk. Given the fact, in a sense, that we have this evidence from Asoka inscriptions that he sent Buddhist missionaries to Egypt, and we also find that there's evidence in Egypt that Buddhist missionaries arrived in Egypt, we can be sure that there were, in a sense, Buddhists in Meroe when the Meroitic script was invented. Asoka used Karasthi to write his edicts. The Buddhists also used this writing system to record their scriptures. This means that the Gymnosophists would have had a long tradition of employing Karasthi to communicate their ideas. The Gymnosophists were probably well respected by the Meroites, and some Meroites probably had knowledge of Buddhist teachings and literacy. Meroites had long played a role in the history of Buddhism. For example, in many of the Buddhist texts, there's mention of the Blamii, a prominent group in the Meroitic Sudan. And there are also these Blamii are also mentioned in the polytext of Tipitaka and in the polytext of Vinava Pitaka. We see, in a sense, that given the fact that the Blamii were already, in a sense, associated with Buddhism, and that Buddhists had been sent to Egypt, we can understand how, in a sense, the Meroites would have been quite familiar with Buddhism and the Kharosthi script. Flavius Philostratus, the writer of Vita Paulinae, Volume 1, claimed that the gymnosophists of Meroe originally came from India, and this we can be sure of. One of the very important things that we have to find is the fact, in a sense, that many of the symbols in the Meroitic writing do not relate to Egyptian hieroglyphics. At that time in Egypt, they used the Demotic script. We find, in a sense, on the other hand, that many of the symbols used to write the Meroitic script are really of Kharosthi origin. As you can see in these pictures, the Kharosthi script is very close in comparison to the Meroitic script. In fact, 17 symbols or more in Meroitic agree completely with the Kharosthi writing. Hines' Grammar of Meroitic provides the necessary material to compare Meroitic with other languages to find its cognate language. Hines recognized three approaches to the study of Meroitic: 1. Philological, 2. Comparative, and 3. Structural. The morphological syntactic approach. The philological method of Hines were informed guesses based upon context. In the comparative method, the structures of two or more languages are compared to determine the relationship between languages. Hines' discussion of Meroitic affixes provide us with the linguistic material to compare Meroitic successfully to the Tocharian or Kahshanna language. This allowed us to be able to read, in a sense, the Meroitic script. In addition to being able to study and know that Buddhism existed in these areas, we also find that there are many common place names or toponyms found in the Sudan that also appear in Central Asia. These shared toponyms between Central Asia and Sudan include Pap, Karnak, Kukushka, Shaur, Kandi, Urban, Kara, and Kapura. These place names can be compared with the maps of Central Asian Sudan supplied by Dr. Vamos Toth Bator. And these place names provide us with even more evidence that the Kahshanna and the Meroites were, in a sense, a united group. Recognition of analogous structural elements in relation to Kahshanna and Meroitic allowed us to divide the Meroitic phonemes into words. Griffith provided us with evidence for the selected Meroitic nouns. Abdullah was sure that he had found certain verbs that, after I compared them to some of the verbs used in the Meroitic language, I found that there was cognition, that they agreed. The discovery that Tocharian is cognate to Meroitic has led to the full decipherment of the Meroitic script. We can translate Meroitic using the Tocharian language. This allows us to obtain new information about the Meroitic civilization. My research into Kahshanna Tocharian has led me to recognize that this language is probably used as a lingua franca, or trade language in Central Asia by diverse peoples living there in an intense bilingual environment. I also, in a sense, was able to use this knowledge to translate the first inscription from Meroe. To test this hypothesis, I attempted to decipher an inscription from Musawarat es Sufra. The inscription included several Meroitic signs. It also included a man and a woman kissing. This pornographic scene was quite interesting because when you look at the words, they go exactly along with the picture. The picture sold with the inscription is a graphic depiction of a sexual experience. Reading from right to left, we have the following Meroitic words. Nimkaote. In Kahshanna, these words had the following meaning, a tendency to gain wonderment. In other words, according to this particular inscription, from Musawarat es Sufra, the tendency to aim for wonderment shows in a sense that these people were there to have sex. And that to these early Meroitic people, sex was very, very important. Meroitic, in a sense, is basically a suffixing language. The funerary tablets are written in third person. I have deciphered many Meroitic artifacts. As a result, I have made a word list of Meroitic that you can read to use to decipher Meroitic inscriptions. This dictionary of Meroitic inscriptions can be found on the internet. Also, when I did the decipherment of the great Tanya Lamani inscription, I also left some inscriptions and provide a full grammar of the Meroitic language. The Meroitic inscriptions are quite interesting. Any short examination of the Meroitic inscriptions allow us to gain keen insight into what the Meroitic people felt about themselves, their religion, and their culture. Here I will discuss some of the Meroitic inscriptions. I will provide a discussion of some of the Meroitic offering tables and some of the stellars. I know that these texts will be unacceptable to some researchers because of the presence of a series of common formulas found within them and new interpretations of specific Meroitic words. Some of the offering tables I will discuss in this posting include those of Meroitic, the Padime or High Priestess of Karnak, and also in a sense of the inscriptions of Tanya Damani and several others. The Meroitic inscriptions are read from right to left. In reading these inscriptions, I have discovered that the so-called word divider sign should be read as good. Now, let's look at some of these inscriptions. One of the most famous inscriptions is the inscription of from Karnak. This inscription is of Bleke with Weke. I'll read the translation. O Isis the good and Osiris the eternal, Yapanyai is to live forever. The good Blamike gives the donation of the spirit body offering honor, replenishment to Yapanyaye's gift of the spirit body, or Kye, to open up good and dignity. Revitalizes its custom, the offering of honor to guide and open up for him a measure of the shining new vivification. Dignity opens up the withdrawal of the offering of this object of respect, Yapanyaye. Praise the grand offering of the revitalization of the city of Napata by offering of this object of respect. The living crown prince is capable of opening with force the power of this object of respect. The patient's inner heart exists living. The donation begins the dispatch of the object of respect on his journey to paradise. The Peshto exists and is capable of opening with force the power of the offering of the object of respect. The innermost offering is honor and good. The lucky inner heart ignites honor and good. She, Yapanyai, is to be reborn to realize a prayer for a satisfying and grand rebirth. She goes down the path to realize protection and dignity. Give permission for the rebirth, the great living inner heart, and the soul to behold the rebirth. The mistress, Isis, to lead this act. The vital living grand donation and her generosity to lead the donation. Go offering to begin the good with Isis the good. This is a very important inscription, and again it tells us much about how we look at the Meroitic people. The Meroitic people, in a sense, appear to have felt that you have to try to live a good life, and that by living a good life, you're going to be able, in a sense, to spread wonderment and joy to others. Griffin, in his decipherment of the Meroitic script, used many inscriptions from the barks of Natakamani and Amanatori. Many of the writings of Natakamani and Amanatori was what was written in what is called hieroglyphic Meroitic. At the Lion Temple of Naka, we find Natakamani on the left facade and Amanatori on the right. Under the feet of the ruling pair, we find frenzies of their defeated enemies. There are a number of Meroitic hieroglyphics on the front of the Naka Lion Temple. There are 3 columns of hieroglyphic inscriptions under the falcon of King Natakamani. Reading from left to right, we see the following. The erection of this structure elevates our tradition of building. Brilliant, also desired indeed. This spot brings great light and also leaves a legacy of unity. We can interpret the inscriptions and engravings from this part of the temple as follows. King Natakamani smites the enemies of Monroe. The royalty has made the erection of this structure to elevate as is our tradition. Brilliant is also indeed desired. This spot to bring great light to many and also lead to the Meroites a legacy of unity. Here we have another funerary stela. This funerary stela is of Metaye. This stela dates back to the 2nd century. It has a reddish-white undercoat. It comes from grave 275, Karnak. The stela is located in Cairo Egyptian Museum, JE 40229. The couple, Metaye and Abakarta, stand under the inner wings of the sun disk. Metaye wears her hair with a top knot and cornrows. This man may be either Metaye's husband or father. I'm uncertain because the words Ab-A can be interpreted as her father. If this is correct, the reading Abakarta would mean her father, Karta. The grave was excavated by William Randall McIver at Karnak. The skeleton in the grave was of a woman. The pointed breasts on the figure indicate that she was a young woman. Standing side by side suggests that this man was her husband. Since the grave contained only one skeleton, we can imagine that Abakarta was depicted on this stela to show his devotion to his wife. There are 3 sets of inscriptions on this stela. There are inscriptions in front of Metaye and Abakarta, and an inscription between the legs of Abakarta. Reading from right to left, beginning with the inscription between the legs of Abakarta, then the inscription before Abakarta, and finally the one in front of Metaye, we have the following inscriptions between Abakarta's legs. Pray for the patron to commence. The inscriptions in front of the man read, Isis the good, Osiris the eternal. Abakarta gives permission for the offering of this object of respect, Metaye, to acquire greatness and protection. The inscriptions in front of the woman read, Isis the good, Osiris the eternal. Metaye, renew her honor down the path to abundant almsgiving. The patron Metaye has commenced the rebirth. There's a number of inscriptions for Prince Tadikin. Prince Tadikin, he lived around 100 to 200 BC, and he left us a very interesting stela. And on this stela, we see the prince, and we see him surrounded by gods. He also left us an offering tablet. First, I'll translate the stela of Tadikin. O good Isis, give Tadikin Ka, grand inner heart and soul, to behold the path of rebirth. The good inner heart prays to witness its manifestation. This bequeathal to open and elevate the object of respect, Tadikin, gift of the Ka's rebirth, O Isis, you give the manifestation of the bequeathal prestige, the gift of the Ka's and the external body's rebirth. Indeed, Tadikin's revitalization will be the rebirth of the bequeathal of the Ka. Let's look at this offering tablet of Tadikin. It also has an interesting message. There's an inscription under the gods, and there's an inscription that goes around the tablet. The inscription under the god reads, dispatch this object of respect to Deccan to live and to reflect on good. May it go forth. The inscriptions that go around the tablet are read as follows. Isis the good, Osiris the eternal. To decken, to live good, and to acquire a lasting legacy of good. The patron's legacy is for the Ka's transmigration. Measure the good rebirth now. Give withdrawal to the Ka for revitalization and exaltation. Register the send-off of the Ka to invigorate the good offering of Tedekan. He is to be reborn to transmit good as his gift to mankind. The Ka's noble rebirth of a grand soul. One of the first inscriptions that I deciphered was one of the inscriptions of Tanya Damani. Tanya Damani was a leading king of the Meroites, and he left us one of the longest, in fact, the longest Meroitic inscription. I deciphered this inscription and I published it in the journal Nubica back in 1999. But here I'm not going to really discuss the decipherment of the Tanya Damani Stela. I'm instead going to discuss the votive tablet of Tanya Damani. The most interesting Meroitic text concerning Apidimak, and Apidimak is the lion god of the Meroites, is found on the votive tablet of Tanya Damani, which is now found in the Paris Museum. On this votive tablet, Tanya Damani is depicted on the obverse side, and the god Apidimak on the reverse side. On the reverse side of the Tanya Damani votive tablet, the god Apidimak is depicted wearing a short apron and him crown. On this votive tablet, Apidimak also wears armlets, bracelets, a collar, and pectoral. Inside a panel in front of Apidimak, we find a cursive Meroitic inscription. The inscription in the panel on the reverse side of the votive tablet of King Tanya Damani make it clear that the king acknowledged the important role the god Apidimak played in his life. These inscriptions can be read either from right to left or top to bottom. Reading from right to left, we read, transliteration of the reverse side of the votive tablet of King Tanya Damani. You, it is Apidimak who gives guidance. Revitalize support for me, King Tanya Damani. You guide me to satisfaction and much reverence for your patron. Give it amicably to me. May it go forth. Reading the same inscription from top to bottom, we find the following. O Apidimak, guide and make honor for your patron. Give here your full measure of good indeed. It is thou, Apidimak, who gives leave to eminence for your patron. So as you can see, Tanya Damani was a very good devotee of the god Apidimak. One of the most interesting people in Meroitic history is Queen Amanishiketo. Amanishiketo has left us many artifacts. These artifacts are engraved, these artifacts are beautiful, and these artifacts give us keen insight into the richness of the Meroitic civilization. Queen Amanishiketo, she left us beautiful engravings. She left us work with bracelets, ringlets, and others. But one of her most important gifts to us is the stela of Amanishiketo. The stela of Amanishiketo is inscribed on the front, and there's also an inscription on the edge. We'll translate the front of the Amanishiketo stela, and it reads, Amanishiketo, noble and good restored. Manifest the external spirit now. Command the transmittal of the soul to commence. Give guard the ascension of the apparition. May it go forth. The object of supplication and good, Amanishiketo, goes to witness a new existence. Arrange to leave a legacy and bless life. Leave to set in motion new, the rebirth. Act to command good to manifest. The propitiation to pour out. God ignites and manifests the abstract personality of man. To investigate a new reverence and good, the offering's only acquisition. Reverberate. Initiate the offering of a good prayer for the patron's luck. Indeed, the blessings to elevate the object of supplication's rebirth. The abstract personality of man to unlock indeed the great holy place of good to merit existence. The commander acts to uplift greatness, unlock from a distance its acquisition. Set in motion her existence to investigate benevolence and dignity. Lay good on the patron. Lay good on the patron. It is obligatory at this time to leave a legacy at this moment, dispensing your satisfaction. Certainly her abstract personality to manifest the object of supplication, a spirit much favored to increase. On the edge of the inscription, on the edge of the stela, we read the following. The blessed dead, Amanishiketo, prays for nourishment of the obligatory offerings, to merit for the patron to retire exalted. Her lasting legacy is abundant almsgiving. So as you can see, the Meroitic writing provides us with keen insight into the civilization and culture of the Meroitic people. I have attempted to outline to you much of the civilization and culture of the Meroitic people. And the credit to you with many of the publications and also the museums where I got material to write this particular video. I hope you enjoyed it, and again, the Meroitic script provides us with keen insight into Meroitic civilization. Thank you very much for your time.